To the first ever backstage conversation on TBA21's new digital platform, Stage. My name is Markus Reymann, and I have the extreme honor to host this conversation, moderate this conversation between three fantastic women, Francesca Thyssen-Bornemisza, Joan Jonas, and Patricia Dominguez. We will be talking about commissioning, making and producing artworks, water, maybe mermaids, fairy tales, witches, shamanism, performance, and many, many other things. We have supposedly 45 minutes to do so, but I think this is going to be such an exciting conversation that we reserve the right to go way over time. For all of you that don't know who is who, I'm going to make a very, very quick and very brief introduction. And although I hate reading on screen, I think the three ladies demand precision. Therefore, I'm going to read the bios. So, Francesca Thyssen-Bornemisza is the founder and chair of Thyssen-Bornemisza Art Contemporary, TBA21. She's an activist, a philanthropist, and a patron of the arts. Driven by a belief in the power of art to serve as an agent of change, Thyssen-Bornemisza has supported artists throughout her career in the production and creation of new work that fuels engagement with the most pressing issues of our time. We will be talking a lot more about this and a lot more in depth about the stage and commissioning and all other things. Joan Jonas is a world-renowned visual artist whose work encompasses a wide range of mediums, including video, performance, installation, sound, text, and sculpture. Jonas' experiments and productions in the late 60s and 70s continue to be crucial to the development of many contemporary art genres, from performance and video to conceptual art and theater. Since 1968, her practice has explored ways of seeing the rhythms of rituals and the authority of objects and gestures. And last but not least, Patricia Dominguez. She brings together experimental research on ethnobotany, healing practices, and the corporatization of well-being. The work of Patricia Dominguez focuses on how neoliberalism perpetuates colonial practices of extraction and exploitation. What can be said for this conversation as well is that both Joan's work and Patricia's work somehow frames the period of the lockdown, because the last exhibition at the Museo Thyssen-Bornemisza in Madrid was Joan Jonas, and now we have Stage expanded How to Tread Lightly, which includes Patricia's work. So to start this conversation, I think it is wise to show you some images so that you know what we're talking about. And we start with some films of Joan's work that the Academy has commissioned, which is Moving Off the Land 2. And we're going to see some images of the performances, then some images of the films that are shown in the installation and the exhibition, and then we see some exhibition images. And after that, we will see excerpts from the video of Patricia that is currently installed in Madrid. So please stick with us. It's going to be a fantastic conversation afterwards. But Michael, please play the video now.
The mind evolved in the sea. Water made it possible. All the early stages took place in the water. half the world's wildlife over 40 years. Fished half the fish.
So did the young of these whales seem looking up toward us, but not at us, as if we were but a bit of gulfweed in their newborn sight. Floating on their sides, the mothers also seemed quietly eyeing us. One of these little infants, that from certain queer tokens seemed hardly a day old, might have measured some 14 feet in length and some 6 feet in girth. Octopus's muscles have both radial and longitudinal fibers, thereby resembling our tongues more than our biceps, but they're strong enough to turn their arms to rigid rods or shorten them in length by 50 to 70%. An octopus's arm muscles, by one calculation, are capable of resisting a pull 100 times the octopus's own weight. The most dramatic similarity is the eyes.
A todo esto pido tregua para que el tiempo mejore, para que hablar de lo...
Welcome back. I'm very happy to see that we actually have more viewers right now than at the beginning of the films, which is a really, really, really good sign. This is a small reminder that the Facebook is open. Please, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. They will be forwarded to me, or I'll see them right here. So if you have questions, you can post them right to Facebook and I will be able to pass them on. To get this conversation going, I think, Francesca, I would like to start with you, because the stage is really an extension of the practice that you've started very early on after starting TBA21, which was in 2002, and relatively quickly you've shifted the practice to commissioning and producing art. And so the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about why you took this decision? And yes, and that is testament. The break that Francesca is holding up is testament to 20 years of work, which is the commissioning book. So please fill us in. Why commissioning?
So it started actually pretty early in the days of TBA21 in 2004, when we were approached by Art Angel, which still remain idols of mine in terms of those who went really out of their way to commission works of art that would never otherwise see the light of day. They were so far out there, away from the very, very emerging, hugely commercial world of art. And gallery systems and the art fair systems, which sort of led to all this cattle herd collecting, was something that, of course, I was fascinated by. There was a great dynamic, a huge energy. And of course, if you're just starting, it's a great place to get to know some of the work that is out there at the moment. But I don't know, I just so desperately wanted to have a unique collection. I wanted to have this kind of uniqueness in the works that we created. And I discovered very quickly that so many artists wanted to do projects that otherwise, you know, were very difficult to produce, because they were either ambitious, hugely complicated, or they actually belonged in an area outside the commercial world. We were often approached by biennales and institutions that wanted to do something different. And so in 2004, we commissioned Kutluk Ataman to do something called a project called Kuba, which was really about the Kurdish resistance in Turkey. And it was actually the first time I got involved in an artwork that had a sort of very strong political overtone. And it sort of continued throughout the next 18 years to today, when we just actually published our first book, which I really want to show. I know it's sort of vanishing and disappearing. I have to hold it in front of me like this, because otherwise it's my cow image. But this is a 1,300-page book designed by Irma Bloom, and it's really an anthology of everything that, all of the commissioning work that TBA21 has undertaken over the years. And that has led to us having this unique collection, which I'm really proud of. But taking from my father's history, where, you know, he undertook to lend his collections to the the USSR and the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War, in terms of trying to create some cultural diplomacy between East and West. And this worked incredibly well. I could see the really strong power that message was carrying. And this was, you know, I was like 16, 17, 18, 20 when all of that was going on. And it kind of groomed me in this way into believing that things you know, our exhibitions are hugely important in terms of sharing cultural and values, and the value system that he had was to drive world peace, which sounded hugely ambitious and out of proportion of any one person's dream at the time, as you can imagine, with Reagan and Brezhnev pointing the largest nuclear arsenals at each other. So that was quite a time. But that message always stayed with me, and I always felt that there was something that we could carry with us during these commissions, that not always, not as a rule, not as an obligation, but very often the artists that we worked with found their language in terms of wanting to translate one of these urgencies of today. And we focused immensely on the environment, of course. And then, as you well know, 10 years ago, we founded the Academy, TBA21 Academy, which focused enormously on commissioning works from the, you know, with a focus on the ocean and ocean science and ocean exploration and narration and indigenous voices. And all of these things come up very strongly in many of the works that you've commissioned over these years, including Joan Jonas's piece, Moving Off the Land, which we very proudly, as you say, presented at the Thyssen Museum. So, you know, there's a long history of commissioning at TBA21, and it has led to us having, all of us, and enriched all of our lives immensely. And not wanting to interfere directly with the artistic process of an artist, which is sort of the taboo thing, is just presenting them sometimes with frames or platforms or opportunities or residencies that maybe take them out of their comfort zones as well, and that we can discover this wonderful language of commissioning works together. And it's resulted in a very process-oriented method. So I think Joan's commission took 3 years to develop. So that's really something. These new commissions, however, have taken a few months to develop, because it was a gesture of moving into the digital realm during COVID. In fact, Patricia, who is on this program, Patricia Dominguez, had been invited to do a performance at the Thyssen Museum in order to, you know, respond to Joan Jonas's exhibition. And she was delighted because she's a big fan, as she will tell you herself. But it was disastrous when the museum was closed during lockdown in Spain and back in March. And we had to call up several artists to sort of cancel their performances that we had commissioned them to do. And I just felt terrible about doing that. And I felt that we were just contributing to the inevitable cultural loss that is happening all around us every day, as artists and independent cultural organizations are finding themselves in a void, in an absolute vacuum, and not being able to produce any work. So instead of turning this calamity into a further drama, we initiated this, what was initially a small microsite, in order to host these new projects that we were asking the artists to work on from home, obviously, with whatever material they had at their disposal. And many of them were in lockdown away from their studios as well. So that presented another challenge. And I think asking artists to produce a work in these difficult circumstances initially felt like we were asking them for the moon. And months later, I remember, you know, conversations with several of the artists on the stage program, you know, being so grateful for this lifeline, for us having had this opportunity of working together during these impossible times, and breaking down this isolation that I think we all felt so deeply, and working together in a community. So all of a sudden, this platform, this website, became something of a driver for togetherness, for being there, for reaching out to one another, and being in conversation. And the result has been some very, very powerful work. But blew my mind, actually, the power which the artists have loaded these artworks with, and the strength which they carry with all their beauty and their poetry, and their mysticism. Many of them are quite mystical, and I think there's a sort of genre of works that has kind of emerged from this, which is very, very different from any work that I've ever seen before. So it's wonderful to move into a new space, which is experimental, and which offers everybody a different platform, which includes so many different other elements like calls to action and research clusters, and creating a sort of unfolding these works with conversations like this, and podcast as well. So there's a magic to working online, and that is to, I mean, I've now answered your second question all in one straight monologue, but I'm sorry about that. But I think that there has been a really great new opportunity to explore how technology makes so many different aspects of cultural production accessible to us. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Let me ask you, and this is, and then I come to Patricia and Joan with a similar question. Clearly, there is a very early on experience about this belief in the art to be able to have some positive impact, some form of positive impact. This cultural diplomacy. You called it, and sharing values. Now these past 9 months, there have been this, the effects of the pandemic have been so tremendous. Why was it important for you to continue working, and why was it important to continue working through the arts and not through any other possibility that you would have had as well?
I don't know. I mean, also being in lockdown myself gave me somehow space to think again and to reconjure something new, I think, because we have been for these last 20 years working in a very consistent way with commissions. And I think this is quite a legacy. And I mean, we've been, banging our heads against the wall trying to think, well, what are we going to do for the next 20 years? That's quite a challenge, to get to that point in one's history. And I mean, I was very, very, very influenced by an amazing Indian writer called Arundhati Roy, who wrote an article for the Financial Times on the 3rd of April. I remember it 4th of April. And I remember that. And the article was called "The Pandemic as a Portal." And after going through the whole situation in India, where actually globally there were only 1 million people affected by COVID at that point, now we're 2 million. So that was those days. In a way, look at those in a positive way. But going through the pandemic as a portal, looking at as a portal, as a way through our existence, she describes it as like, well, we can go into the future totally with a new future, but we need to leave all this baggage behind. We need to leave what we really don't need, and we know what we don't need. It's just difficult to give it up. But the idea of treading lightly into the future is what coined the phrase for the exhibition, which is now at the Thyssen Museum. And I borrowed a lot of these ideas of hers because they gave me a huge amount of hope at a time where darkness was looming and none of us knew how long this would take. We still don't know how long this is going to take. But the fear that was amongst us all, and the uncertitude and the ignorance about what was about to happen, was so fundamental, and it was something that was going to erode our confidence as artists, or as programmers, or as producers, or as artistic foundations, that philanthropists. everything just seemed to grind to a halt. And the only positive thing was that we could hear nature. And I think many of us found this incredible moment where we reconnected to nature, no matter where we lived. And that was such an important strength that gave me huge strength as well. And this incredibly spirited article, which I really recommend everybody to try and read. It was such a positive message at the end that we can transcend this and reach a different future. And to do so, we have to participate in that future. We have to do something about the world we live in. And as artistic producers, TBA21 wanted to delve into something that was also carbon neutral, that was lighter, that was more accessible. I've always struggled with the fact that many artworks and galleries and exhibitions prove themselves to be rather inaccessible, which gives the art world the wrong reputation for being elitist, because it really isn't. But it's perceived by those who don't find it accessible and approachable, that kind of reputation.
Patricia, as I think the work that is currently being shown on stage is part of the longer research and a longer body of work that you had already been working on, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the work, and maybe you can also then say how this situation that you found yourself in when this commission came, how this situation influenced the work, and if it took a different turn or if you actually stayed on the same trajectory. Is it something that you had already been investigating, and what is it exactly?
So the video is called The Ballad of the Dry Mermaids, and tackles about the crisis in Chile with the privatization of water. Water, like 98% of our water is privatized, and that has big consequences. Some people doesn't have even water for cleaning their hands in the middle of the pandemic. They have to shower by pieces in the last 10 years. So the big corporation just steal all the water, and that has affected all the ecosystem. So during the pandemic, I moved to a rural area, which is 1 hour from there. And we have been going through the biggest mega drought in the last 10 years. It's so hard to see like thirsty animals. You know, everything is dry by these plantations of avocados and citrus. So I was very moved by that. So when Francesca and Sole contacted me, and I just thought, it's like, okay, let's do this and let's talk about this issue. So we contacted one of the main ONGs, and it's not an ONG, but activists called Modatima. It's the movement of defense of the land, water, and the environment. So we ended doing this video in the middle of the pandemic, which was amazing. It was like the spaceship to navigate this chaos and crisis, and as Francesca said, isolation. This video allowed me to like establish all this relationship with the activists, and we share conversations. We were able to move, you know, around, and we were shooting in all these contested sites, like dry rivers. Like the rivers are actually dry, all petroglyphs. I was saying also, Francesca, like all the indigenous people there, like they were kind of cut, and now they are modified through mestizaje into these like rural communities that live in the land and they don't have water. So with this group of activists, we kind of activated these old petroglyphs, you know, like all the cultural patrimony is disappearing. In Chile, for example, the government has cut all the, not all, but a big percentage of the art funding. They just cut all the funding for the scholarships for scientists and artists for next year. And in this area, like the whole corporation is doing their own like cosmology. For example, you used to see like singers to the divine, this traditional way of singing. Now they are singing to the drought. Or for example, all these petroglyphs with like these symbols. Now you just see in the walls, you see like, you know, like stop stealing the water. So the whole cultural patrimony is changing. And I think that also is part of the video. And in terms of efficiency, I don't know if we can talk about art as efficient as activism, for example, but I do think that it opens like a portal to convey like different energies and emotions and kind of like try to understand what is happening in a more complex and layered way, where you have like emotions, history, personalized memories all together. So I do think it does open like a way of talking about these difficult issues in a more complex way that is not maybe as efficient as activism, but I think it's equally important, or even more, what would we do without art or poetry or symbolic thinking?
Joan, throughout your career, have you ever experienced a moment of such tremendous rupture where not just artists question their practice, cultural institution question the spaces that they inhabit, but where so many systemic really violences, inequalities emerge, become more visible through an external situation like we're experiencing now, and this really leads to this kind of intrinsic systemic questioning of so many things?
Well, first of all, I'll say no, I have never experienced it, but I will say that I and a few of my friends who are my age are reminded of growing up in World War II. You know, so we're reminded of World War II, actually, but this is different because it's an invisible enemy and it's also worldwide. It's not just Northern Europe and America and Japan. It's the whole world. So that's very different. And none of us have ever experienced a situation in which things just stopped and came to a standstill. On the other hand, in New York and in America and also in other parts of the world, certain kinds of resistance have emerged, like the Black Lives Matter. And I've been out in the country, but I was in the city. So I heard the demonstrations in April or May, whenever it was, May, I guess, or June, the Black Lives Matter, this bursting out of energy, you know, so it's a whole different kind of energy. People have been pent up in lockdown for a couple of months. And then those demonstrations were partly an example of energy bursting out, you know, cannot be controlled. And so out of that has come a lot of knowledge about the situation, and also the pandemic, the fact that it was worse for some people than others, much worse for some groups than others. So no, I've never been in a situation like this.
Patricia, you mentioned, you know, kind of energies, or both of you now mentioned energies and stories. Joan, a lot of your work starts from fairy tales, from mythologies, from stories that are kind of embedded in the cultural fabric of many societies, and then you start working from there. What is the power or the potential that you see in these embedded stories to then start working from there and reimagining them for today?
Well, I think part of the power comes from the fact that every culture, for instance, the myth of the mermaid that I work with in my piece, so many cultures have that myth. And so when you start to explore a story, like I based one of my works, The Juniper Tree, on a Grimm Brothers fairy tale. And I always trace the roots of these stories. And I trace the roots of the juniper tree all the way back to Egypt and Osiris. And because migration spreads these stories. And so all of these stories have many different roots and sources. They don't just spring out of nowhere. And when I was commissioned to do this work for TBA21, I thought, how can I approach this immense body, you know, the ocean, that's the subject, which is huge. And so I thought, well, what are the myths related to the ocean? And that's why, in this case, I chose the myth of the mermaid. And I traced it. There are many, like the Mexicans have a similar myth. There are myths in different places.
Yeah. You know, we immense pleasure with the Academy to open Ocean Space with your work, which was really, really tremendous. But along the way, we've kind of, you know, always we've invited you to incorporate science, right, as a different form of language, or a different register of seeing, and you've built this very strong relationship to a good old friend and collaborator of the Academy, Dr. David Gruber. And And I believe the way that he was looking at, or what he made visible, was something that that was really intriguing for you, no? Because it really broke with a different register of seeing, or what we understand to be reality. And it somehow the way that he makes us aware of completely different conditions in the water, under the water, in the ocean, also speaks very much about the limitation of our capacity to be in the world and see the world, right? What was that relationship, and what made you actually enter into this conversation?
Well, yeah, well, it was, I knew that TBA21 worked with scientists, but you never put any pressure on me to go in that direction. Or, I mean, of course, the ocean was the subject, but there was never any pressure. I just want to say that now. So I met David Gruber at a meeting in New York, convening of different people. I think that's where I met him. Yeah. And I read about his project, which was, he was concerned with perception and how fish perceive, how underwater creatures perceive, how they see and feel. And because I deal with perception in my work, I thought this is a perfect link. And then I met David. He's a wonderful man. And he also, not only does he deal, he makes his own cameras and his own lenses, and he's a diver too. So he really is physically participating in his research and diving. I'm not a diver. And so what he did, to make a long story short, was, well, he shared his archive with me, basically, in a very generous way. So his beautiful underwater shots, that's what led me to be interested in the ocean, by the way, before I was commissioned to do this, was to see photographs taken of underwater creatures in the very, very deep, in the dark depths. Fantastic creatures. I mean, none of us, we're not aware of them. We are more and more now. But when I found them first, most people were not aware of them. Anyway, so David shared his archive with me, and I incorporated a lot of his underwater shots, and I combined it with live performance to make large parts of the video. And one of them was these incredible little lights in the green, some kind of green algae underneath the water. Very magical footage. And then one of my other favorite scenes is the turtle that you've discovered with him, the turtle, because his cameras and his lenses see these bioluminescent, is that what you say?
Biofluorescent,
yeah, of the like the turtle is, we don't see it that way. We just see a green, but it's got all these colors in its shell. And that's true of a lot of, so that's what the magical world of the ocean.
Yeah. Even though you're not a diver, through performance and layering and performing with the images, you kind of immerse yourself in, at least in the material. And whilst we were working, you told me that you built a very strong relationship to the image, and you built the strong relationships to the animals in the image, no?
Well, this was different. I have to say it's the first time, because I've never worked with fish and creatures. And so there's one scene where I'm sort of swimming with the seals. And I have to say, it's the first time I ever had this sensation after a performance, because part of the work is about performance. I really feel that I've been with these creatures in a way I've never felt that before. But it's a virtual feeling, of course. It's a virtual experience. But it's very odd. I had this connection that I've never had before by moving in the projection and in the water. I mean, I worked with swimming too in Jamaica when I visited TBA21 in Jamaica, but it was really being with these creatures in the space of the performance. And, you have to concentrate and really go there. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah. But I think this folding of layer and layer and layer folding on top of each other is there's a similarity to your work, Patricia, as well, right? Because it's not that you perform in front of the screen or anything, but you give the audience the possibility to actually enter into a setting into which you place the film, right? So it is like nearly you call it a shrine, but there's a different engagement with the material that you create, than just projecting it, for example. Could you explain that for you?
Yeah, I think listening to Joan, I think it sounds very quantum, like her relationship to the beings, to the images. So I guess like my work also works like that in a lot of layers and complexities. So it's more like a dream, you know, like you go and you kind of like jump from one dimension to other one, or one landscape to other one. So it's all kind of combined in these layers. And then I have been working with these shrines when I kind of like put together some little like narratives before you enter, you know, these big shrines, you have like the guardians and these kind of portals to enter. So you start building the equation until you see the video. And it really changed, like all the energy or the vibration of the objects before the video. I think they really influence the experience instead of just seeing the video like in a TV screen. It really changed everything. So I've been like studying a lot of like altar building, how you think about like the four cardinal spaces, or the 7 cardinal spaces, the 4 corners. What is first? What is the main part? And it's all very symbolic. So I think it's like that's how I'm building the video installations.
And then you very often layer a layer of animation on top of it, right? So there's another level of artificiality that you put on top. Why?
Yeah, I don't know how to build 3D. I have tried to learn like multiple times, but I just stopped trying. But I have an amazing young artist that helped me. I think with the 3D animation, you can really like imagine and envision these new beings. They look so real. And I really like, you know, that technique. So for me, it's a way of imagining these real beings, like the thirsty avocados moving. It's the only way I can convey things that doesn't exist. So it's like imagining or mixing this object that I cannot, you know, use, and just giving them life in these like hybrids through 3D. I wish I knew how to do it, but I just stopped trying.
Francesca, I think stage is very similar to this, no? It seems to me as if there's so many things that you're interested in, so many things that you have started at different points of your practice with TBA21, all of a sudden all come together in stage, right? Like you said, there's clearly the work, and then there's all the collateral explaining and contextual work around the work, the podcasts that give you more insight into the thinking, but then there's also the research cluster that really gives you an insight into the work that the artists do around the artwork, and then there's another layer, I think, which you're very passionate about, is the call to action, and really being able, or giving the audience the possibility to get engaged with the causes that are somehow embedded in the artworks, right, or touched in the artworks. So somehow, Himali Singh Soing said it in a beautiful post yesterday, the artwork and the artist is relieved from the pressure of having to do all of the activist work as well, but it can actually endorse other things, and it can just simply be an artwork. But can you talk about this coming together of all of these things that you're so passionate and interested in?
Well, I suppose it came about because over the years, and having engaged with so many different commissions and seeing how many different elements come into it, and not only because many of them have been collaborations, they've been largely interdisciplinary. They have embraced so many different skills and talents, and that's one thing that I've always been so amazed by, because of my natural sense of curiosity that I have, watching artists transport themselves over so many different sources of knowledge, from old indigenous knowledge right up to the latest science, you know, and everything in between, as well as social and political information. And they're so informed by so many different elements that I thought this is really the way we all should be thinking, because the world is so stuck in its different disciplines, in its silos of knowledge, that there's very little chance of there being sort of a holistic understanding of many of the really challenging situations that we have, and often too explosive or too massive for any one person to ever comprehend. So I think it's this incredible talent that artists have of being able to pollinate all of these different these like accepting that we are in an ecosystem. We're not, I mean, you cannot look at nature, the world around us. We've tried to structure and organize it into all these grids, but that is so against nature. And I don't know, just an understanding that way of enriching one's talent or one's understanding of something or one's reading of something, as you say. I think that is something that I've always wanted to display, but in an exhibition context and even in a catalogue, because very often these things, you know, the prospect of organizing an exhibition, there's so much pressure, there's such a time pressure, and the catalogue has to be finished, and, you know, you pile it with things, but you don't often reveal what all the research and all of this impactful information that people can read. And it's hard for me to present works of art that then say, well, you know, there it is, and nobody can come back to us and say, well, how did they get there, and what is actually the root of this, and what was the idea behind it, and how do you explore that, and how did that unfold, and what does that mean in this or that context, and how can we engage? That was the last question. It's like, if you want to make an art program that has measurable impact, you know, which is something that we all want to see today. If you want to sort of be able to say, we are able to make a difference, this is the challenge. But to do it with the sensitivity and the artistic eye and the poetry of much of the work that we still see coming out, the response to stage has been very mystical and very, very sensitive and not at all drum beating. But on the other hand, because there is this call to action, there is this possibility for people to sort of engage and ask questions. And how do I get, you know, if it creates empathy, or it creates an understanding of a situation that maybe people hadn't had before, maybe this artwork opens up a new way of looking at something. There's very few instances where you're given immediately the opportunity to engage with it and say, don't, you know, keeping everybody on the site, but saying, this is what the artist has selected. This is what the artist cares about. This is what the artist wants you to engage with. And it's in a separate part of the website. It's not in the artwork, because it is so important that the artworks remain true to themselves. And as Himali says, you know, they're not a vehicle, they're not to be instrumentalized. The artist's work is nothing to challenge or to channel towards having a strong message. But I suppose in the art world, I might be known for wanting to drive change. I guess my father's influence as a cultural diplomat, you know, that I saw and witnessed myself, the impact that those efforts that he made back in the 80s, you know, made. And so I have the experience, and I feel very driven by this. And this is a very personal decision that I've made many years ago. And I've tried to navigate this as honestly as possible. And this online stage has given, well, which of course I designed and you know, built into it all of these elements with the incredible help of our Prague team. Whoop, whoop. I got to throw in something to the Prague team and Brains, who, actually built this thing for us, and all the connectivity that it brings together. It's magnificent because it is really media at its best, rather than taking works of art that were in galleries or in exhibitions and trying to put them online. Everything is developed for the online. Everything is being built for the online. And that is really a different way of operating completely. So I'm really excited about that. And whilst I'm mentioning people, I do have to say thank you to Soledad Guiteres, because she has been my partner in crime throughout this, and she's the curator at TBA21 Madrid, and somebody I'd never worked with before. And we have become soul sisters in one respect, that we saw the power and the potential of this together, and we built this together. So it's really not just me, but I've really become became excited about is, once the artist understood that there's all that potential as a collateral material to their artwork, they became really enthusiastic on how to use this. And I think all of the research cluster is just getting richer and richer and more complex. And it's really an incredible research resource for students as well, looking for new ideas, looking for new material, wanting to know how artists got to where this artwork came from, and what is the background to that. Because I've never underestimated the incredible power that artists have to do their research, and that the amount of time that they spend on it, and to open themselves up to so much information, and doing their field work and doing all this research. It's astonishing, and it's somehow lost in the exhibition space.
So we're going strong for nearly an hour, and the other very positive fact is that we still have the more or less the same amount, if not more, a couple of viewers more. But I don't have any questions. So as we're completely digital and connected and all of that, please feel free to share your questions. I want to go back to something that you said. The art is not being instrumentalized. Both Joan and Patricia, you both work with very young people, with kids in both of the works that we've discussed. And Joan, you were very adamant about that these kids are not supposed to be, and they're not meant to be instrumentalized to convey a certain message, right? It was quite striking when we installed the exhibition, and for the first time, all videos were playing. It was the first time that I saw the kids, the young people, very young adults, reappearing in your work. And then I went home and I turned on, the TV, the news, whatever, and it was the first global climate strike. And all of a sudden, all of these things came together, right? And it was just tremendous. This relationship that you create with the kids, but then the kids also with the work. Can you tell us a little bit about this relationship, why it was important to work for over such a long period? They're now in the second work of your works with them, and how you create this resonance between them and the material.
Well, this group of kids, now they're young, several are young adults for sure. I first worked with them in the piece for the Venice Biennale called "They Come to Us Without a Word," which was also about creatures, about fish, about bees and other creatures. And I wanted these children to be present, because the children, they are going to inherit this situation. And so I wanted that to be one of the points, this juxtaposition of the children with the material. And in both these works, that work and then the one for TBA21, I did a lot of research, and I included facts about the situation. So it wasn't overtly political, saying you must do that or this is going to happen. they were just simply facts about extinction, about overfishing, about overhunting, and all these situations that are going on in the environment, in relation to the environment. Also, glaciers are melting. So this was all part of the piece itself. But the children, I also, it was very important to me, well, for the last, I don't know, I'm trying to think, 8 years or so, to have a very diverse group of people to work with. That's been an important consideration. Also, wonderful artists, and so for those two reasons, I wanted these children. They're all children of friends of mine, so I didn't put out a call, and so they just came into the work, and as Martin Scorsese says, they behaved. So I didn't ask them to act, but I put them in situations where they had to, like the bee dance. We made a little dance using the pattern of the bees. So I think they picked up certain things. They were exposed to all the material, which I'm glad of. And then when I started working on the installation for TBA21 in Venice, and I have to say also that this piece began in Kochi, India, and Francesca was saying that she chose this site, the Vasco da Gama Square. I have to say that's another situation in which when the work is put in a certain context, it certainly alters the piece. So instead of being in a colonial wall-off, townhouse, it was in this public square in Kochi, India. And I was very glad about that because the people who were in the square, who were not in the art world at all, saw the work and were very affected because they had never seen anything quite like it. But anyway, so the children were older by the time we made the piece for the installation, which was a few years after Kochi. It began as a performance. And I included a lot of facts. So it's not that I said, I try not to be didactic, but I included facts. And I was really surprised to learn that a lot of people don't know that we come from the sea, that we're made up of the same elements, that we have some of our features are very similar. And I certainly wasn't fully aware of that. So the children, of course, because they were in rehearsals, were exposed to all those facts. And the only thing I can say is that I think art, not didactic, but art can expose people to certain information, which they're not going to be aware of unless they are put in a certain context. Because you can read the newspaper, watch television, but I think that coming close to certain feelings and emotions really will alter one's view of things. It's been a growing awareness, and I think that's why I went in this direction more fully, was because of your TBA21 and Francesca's desire to do the impossible, save the ocean, But my desire was to show the beautiful creatures in the ocean, to show what is there, so children would be aware of it. Anyway.
Yeah, but in a time where facts and truth are so contested, it's striking that you choose to include this kind of information in your work, that you choose. You always talked about the importance of the mystical, right? So there is something that you do through your work that touches, that incorporates facts and truth, but it touches and it's meant to touch on a different level, I believe.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons for the mermaid myth is because I really believe, we do come from the sea. The whales came on the land, they developed feet, and then they went back in the ocean. I do believe that we have some kind of a memory in our DNA of being in the ocean. And so I think that's not a fact. That's my own belief and intuition. But I believe it's true that we have a relationship to the ocean that's unconscious or conscious, whatever. And so to include the facts, which is that our semicircular canals are the same in our ears as in the fish ears, you know, in the fish hearing devices, whatever they are. That's a fact. So there's certain facts that you can bring into it. And we're in a very bad age of it's called fake news, but I don't like to use that word because of who uses it all the time in my, you know, in politically.
Yeah.
But I think that we all have to trust each other and share this information. And David Gruber, for instance, is a very generous person, and he's deeply involved with research about how whales communicate. You know, that's a very painful situation that's going on now. I just want to also mention, because I included Moby Dick as a quote, but I would say that Herman Melville and Moby Dick, it's one of the first works of art that included scientific information. You know, every other chapter was scientific information about the sperm whale, and then the story, you know, that was a very important structural structure for fiction.
Yeah. There are two questions. One is from Renata Carrera Pellegrini, and she asks, or it's an insight, it says, how can we use poetry and convey virtual feeling now at COVID times so that we have people engaged in transformation? She says, this is a great question I want to bring to my artistic process. Thanks for the insight. So that's an insight. Then we have one from our friend Jonathan Knowles, and he says, what are your thoughts on fostering an artistic mindset in youth? So I guess this is to Joan and Patricia. From toddlers to teens, how can we all help to bring more people to appreciate this mindset, especially when addressing global challenges?
Patricia.
Good question. Well, I'm going to answer in two ways. Like, I've been also working with teenagers in my last 5 pieces, because usually they're the ones that are invisibilized or hidden in all these crises. They are the ones that take care of the burned animals. They are the ones that take care of the trophy horses. In this case, these 2 girls are the ones that actually live there and are devoting their lives to defend the water. Their mother, one of the main activists, and they deal with urine infection because they don't have water in the school. They deal with not being accepted in school because people are bullying their mother. So I feel like, at least in the pieces I have worked with these young humans, and I always try to portray them in this mystical way, or maybe as defenders. So they kind of shine in green or they shine in blue. They are the ones that are the main protagonists of the pieces. And that, I think, that's also have helped them to see where they are, which usually are so contested places, in a new way, reorganizing what exists so they can be there and have a voice, and they're the ones that chose how to perform and everything. So I think this kind of artistic thinking in kids and teenagers is so important, just to have whatever you have in reality and modified it through art. Just have that space, that breathe. For example, I have this piece which is it's called Eres un Princeso. I did in Florida. I worked with 1 month with these kids in the stables. So they were trophy horses from Narcos, and these kids live with the horses. So I just portrayed them over the horses with plants, and I don't know, for them was really special to just change all the dynamics of the stable for 2 days from the filming, and this case was the same. So I think this artistic thinking, where you can see the world in colors, in textures, you can play and rearrange reality. I think something to really teach or propitiate in kids and teenagers. It's just a space of freedom to rethink the relationships.
Yeah.
Can I answer a little bit of Jonathan's question? just looking from the sort of more museological point of view and exhibition making, museums have always had a very big responsibility toward education in the museums, and it's super interesting now to work at the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum because they have an incredible education, and it's run by a very visionary person called Rufino. And I have to say we're just at our beginning, beginning to understand one another. But art education in museums is something that has progressed immensely in the last 10 years, let's say. But in the case of stage, just actually using a medium that young people use on a daily basis in a very, very clever and sophisticated and fast way more, they're more better informed. They make their choices. They take decisions on things that is governed by their own way of reading what they have on their screen. They're very particular. They're developing their own minds. And, I don't think that media is anywhere as destructive as my generation tends to think it is. But what I found working with this medium has, and as I described earlier, having all of these different elements, particularly the research cluster, this gives access to young people further and deeper information on a lot of things. So there's Netflix things on there, there's CNN, there's Observer stories, as well as the research the artist did. So there's a combination of things that people can access to go, well, this is intriguing, but how does this actually work? And what is the real situation out there? And needless to say, it is curated by the artist. It is governed by this project of wanting to reveal, truths about the situation that we're in, because very often they're completely hidden and they're politicized, which is really the drama that we're seeing with COVID. It's not about you and me anymore. It's about politics. And I think that if we're able to transcend all of that and find a medium that is polarizing and that gives people an opportunity to explore things themselves, I think you're starting to really achieve something here with young people, because they are the ones that are curious. And I don't know where a curious teenager is supposed to go today to find out, what is the situation with water in Chile? Privatization of water? How do you privatize water? What does this mean? How many rivers are privatized? All of it. Who owns it? French companies. Why do the French companies own all of Chile's water? What happens if you find water in your garden? Well, you have to announce it to the government because it doesn't belong to you. And all of this stuff is like, but of course it's not in the work of Patricia, but it is in this poetic, fantastic, animated way. That, and her graphics and the way she's designing things, it's really very much another language than the one I've worked with until today. So Jonathan, I think that let's partner up together again. We've wanted to do this for a long time, and I really do believe in how this can reach out to young people. I have a fundamental belief in this.
Thank you very much. It is 8:15. Northern Europe is having dinner. We can see this in our audience attendance figures. But there is a comment by Silvia Wintersberger, and she says, my copy of the commission's book will arrive just in time for Christmas, which is great. Enjoy. But it says, what do you wish more people understood about the world's oceans? What makes you optimistic about the future of our oceans?
Marcus, you answer that one.
I will answer, but it's a great one to follow Jonathan Knowles, who is also a fantastic ocean advocate. And I'm sure he's going to bring you the latest technology gadgets that you can just dream of to the stage. So that's it's so good to know that Jonathan is with us. So what do I wish more people understood about the world's oceans? I wish that we could have a conversation that is not climate or ocean. I wish people would understand that the ocean is our best ally in the struggle against the climate crisis. The ocean is the biggest driver of climate, and we need to treat it a lot better. That's what I wish for. What makes me optimistic? What makes me optimistic is this generation of amazingly engaged young people that go out into the streets, that demand change, that demand systemic change, that demand our politicians to take responsibility, to tell the truth, and to act. Right? We see the big frustration that is currently, bubbling up in the entire environmental crowd, right? By the way that politics is addressing the pandemic, right? All of a sudden, everything stops, right? And this is how you address a crisis. By saying, okay, maybe 2035, we're going to have our emissions, which is already super ambitious, and everybody is falling over because this is so exciting, right? We know it's not enough, right? But this younger generation that is currently and constantly on the streets. I mean, just Joan, you mentioned Black Lives Matters. I mean, it's amazing that this energy is kept, and it's just there, and it's constant, and it's on the streets, and it's demanding, and it's and that is what makes me hopeful. But do not forget, the ocean is our best ally. Treat it better. That's what I have to say.
I agree.
Yeah. Anybody else wanting to say something towards that? Sorry.
I want to thank you both for doing all this. And for
Joan, I wanted to say that it has been an honor and a pleasure to know you, to get to have the opportunity to work with you, to watch these incredible performances go from the Vasco da Gama Square to the Prado Museum, which is, I know, your favorite museum in the world. And it was just such a joy to make that possible for you, and to have two state museums in Madrid celebrate you the same week. That has never happened, nor to Velázquez, nor to Picasso, nor to anyone. So there you are. And, you deserve it. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you and to consider you a friend. And you're probably the most wonderful person. And I know my mother stole you because now you're best friends with my mom, but it's been an experience I will take with me to the grave.
Oh, thank you,
Joan. That I can only second that. The moment you made life come to a grinding halt on Vasco da Gama Square, and all of a sudden all the hustle and bustle stopped, and everyone was transfixed on you. Two, the scenes at the opening of Ocean Space when you performed, and it was like a riot outside. It was like a punk concert. This was amazing, and to see you in conversation with Sylvia Earle for the opening of Ocean Space.
Yeah, we should bring Sylvia Earle into the.
Yeah, absolutely.
She said the ocean has given us so much. We have to return the favor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I loved about the water situation in Chile, I have to say. Now, I didn't know about that. So, Patricia, that's very, very interesting. And
it's crazy. Here, people can buy a river, actually. That's how bad it is. And leave the people that live on the river with no water.
So what happens when you buy the river? What rights do you have?
The government gives you rights, and then you use it for your corporate plantations, avocados, citrus.
Oh, I see.
And the Constitution doesn't allow any minimum for human consumption. So it's a crisis, a humanitarian crisis. Yes,
that's right.
And that's also. But I also want to thank you for your strength, Joan, and your continuous experimentation is super inspiring to see. I have followed your work since I was like in art school, and I've seen you perform, and you're my inspiration as a younger artist. Where to go, and just to see your energy is just it will like stay with me.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for that. Very
I'm
inspiring.
overwhelmed. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's a great coming together of so many. TBA21 brings people together in a very special way.
Yes.
And I want to say thank you to Patricia, because actually she was the first artist that we called, and with Himali Sengsoing, I have to admit, and you know, she responded in such a positive way, and that's the thing I love about the spirit of young people, really, truly, that there was this young artist that I had been looking at, I just met, and I really wanted to bring her into our program and have a work of hers. And, you know, it was just this incredible energy which you responded to this whole thing. And you went along with all these experiments and how the stage then developed over the next few months. And you just went, yes, and you need some more material, that's for sure. And it was really with working with your piece, which is incredibly complex in many ways, that we really pushed the envelope with the development of stage. So I really owe it to you as an artist to have helped us develop something completely new and experimental. So thank you so much.
No, and thank you for the confidence. This just felt like a family. I was like, oh, I need to record my teacher. And Francesca was like, send her a recorder. I don't have one. It's like, I don't know, it was such a shared confidence. It's such a new way of like working, which I really appreciate. In so many levels, you saved my last 4 months. And I feel like I have like a family now, an art family. So thank you.
You are a fan.
Gentlemen, let me tell you, this is your last chance to ask a question, because otherwise we're gonna end this fabulous conversation. And if you don't know Patricia's work yet, go to stage, look at the first 2 chapters that were released yesterday and today. It's a fantastic downloadable PDF that you can look at. It's texts written by Patricia, and it's fantastic. So if you don't know her work yet, please go and see it on the stage and follow the stage. Every day something is happening. Every day something is new. You can find out, you can dive deep into the research clusters, you can dive deep into the podcast series, you can take your time and watch the works and watch them again and watch them again, listen to them again. But follow this very, very, very dynamic platform. It's going to get more and more difficult to go to the museums. But art should be a central part of our lives, and culture definitely. And so therefore, this is your chance to engage with full lockdown, partial lockdown, or no lockdown with art on a daily basis. I'm talking and talking and talking. There's no questions coming. So I would say we leave it at that. Thank you very much for this fabulously inspiring conversation, all the insights into your work. Thank you for being so generous and sharing. And thank you, Francesca, for making this possible and having me as the moderator of this first backstage conversation ever. So I'm very, very honored to have done that.
You did it brilliantly. Thanks so much, Markus. It's great to be in company and everybody else. So thank you all. And come into the next backstage, which will be in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So hopefully we will be announcing that on stage. So thanks a lot for being with us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Patricia. Bye, Joan.
Joan, see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Take
care. Patricia.
New York City.
Ciao. See you.
Bye.
Amazing what